Metal Jesus Rocks here, and I'm in my backyard enjoying the summer, drinking a brew, and playing a little bit of Vagrant Story. Now this is a Square game, and it was the last one that they made for the PlayStation 1 way back in 2000. And they basically took everything that they learned from the Final Fantasy games and all the others that they made and put it into this one title. So let's take a look. Vagrant Story is an action role-playing game developed by Square, now known as Square Enix, for the PlayStation 1 in 2000. Square released a number of classic role-playing games in the 1990s, but Vagrant Story was to be the culmination of all of their programming experience on that early console. Specifically, the main developer's goal was to create a rich RPG experience that was completely 3D, with no pre-rendered backgrounds, and a fairly complex lighting system. The result was astounding for the time, and most professional reviewers considered the game to be a modern classic and the graphic engine bleeding edge. My reaction to the visuals of Vagrant Story were not so kind. It's shocking to compare the graphics we currently enjoy on modern consoles compared to those in the year 2000. But it's important to keep in mind that the PlayStation 1 was capable of. The PS1 was only a 32-bit console, had only 2 megs of RAM, and ran at a pokey 33 megahertz. Now that's megahertz, not gigahertz like today's consoles. It's roughly 10 times less powerful than the PSP. Now, I hate to go on about the visuals, but the surprising thing I found when playing the game is that I actually grew to really appreciate the graphics as the hours wore on. The characters are well animated and interesting to watch. The environments have a lot of detail, and even the facial expressions peek out from those really low quality textures. If there was ever a game developed that could reach a new audience with simply just updating the graphics, Vagrant Story is it. So what's the game like? Well, like I mentioned, it's an action RPG set in medieval times in a fictional kingdom and a ruined city of Le Monde. You play as Ashley Wright, who travels to Le Monde to investigate the link between a cult leader and a duke. In the intro, your character is blamed for the murder of that duke, and then the proper game starts about a week before that murder, and you piece together the conspiracy. Now, I don't want to spend too much time describing the deep story of Vagrant Story, simply because so many people love to explore that on their own. And actually, the game is now available on the PlayStation Store for the PS3 and PSP. What sets Vagrant Story apart from other RPGs of the era is its focus on deep combat, weapon creation, and modification. The game plays like a single-character dungeon crawl, where you go from room to room, solving puzzles to open doors and unlock exits, battling random baddies, and occasionally the big boss. When you run into an enemy, you tap the O button to engage battle mode, and then a wire frame appears around Ashley. Individual body parts within the sphere can be targeted, and the battle system involves the player chaining different attacks known as chain abilities to achieve large combos and deal damage to the enemy. Magic is learned in the game by collecting items called grimoires dropped by enemies. You use these grimoires once on yourself, and then the magic is learned and available to cast using magic points. So there are a lot of nuances to the battle system in Vagrant Story, but one of them that I want to point out is the risk meter in the upper left-hand corner. Basically, the way it works is that as you are hitting on enemies, it starts ticking up, and the more risk you have, the more sort of sloppy your combat will be, the more you'll miss, and also the more damage you'll take. It's almost like a fatigue meter in a lot of other games. But unlike a lot of other games, risk in this is very important to manage, because if you are in a long boss battle, so, boss battles can take 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, sometimes even longer, you really have to manage your risk, because as that starts going up, you will miss all the time. You won't be able to hit anything, and they are doing massive amounts of damage to you. And it's pretty tricky during a boss battle because you can't always get away. Sometimes they have range attacks. So you have to take potions to sort of lower your risk so you can keep doing damage and keep basically, your fatigue as low as possible. It's a very strategic element to the game, and once you sort of get into the nuances of it, it's pretty satisfying and a lot of fun. So there's an awful lot to like about Vagrant Story, but I gotta be honest with you, there are some parts that drove me frickin' crazy. And one of those is the save system. Now I know this is an old game, and old games were really stingy with save points, but man, this game, frankly, it pissed me off because it's really stingy with them. On an entire level, there may be only 2 save points, maybe at the beginning and the end. And the way the game progresses is you'll save, and then you may basically have, a bunch of different rooms to progress through, battles to happen in those, maybe a weapon to build or modify, and then a boss. And if you happen to walk into that boss with the wrong weapon, like I did several times, you die. Now, that's not bad, except for the fact that the save point was so far back that I had to go through all of those steps just to get up to that boss to die. Only to figure out, it actually needs a blunt weapon to kill it. But man, it was just really frustrating. Now, I know a lot of gamers love that sort of stuff, and I respect that. But to me, it feels cheap. And I'm glad that a lot of games nowadays either allow you to save when you want or are not stingy with save points. And unfortunately, Vagrant Story is not one of those. The other complaint about the game was how the menu system was organized. This is a pretty deep and complex battle system, and I actually had to read the manual twice just to sort of figure out where to go and what to do. And I'm not new to RPG games. I was kind of surprised that things were just buried within menus and even under unusual things. Often I had to go into the setup menu to configure weapons when I was... To me, setup is for the game itself, like you would modify, the audio settings or maybe the visual settings, but it just took some getting used to, and like I said, it's a complex game, and it's not helped by a complex menu system. Alright, that's my review of Vagrant Story. And all you collectors out there, just note that there's 2 versions of this game. There's the original black label, which I have here, and then there's also a greatest hits version. Now, the cool thing about the original black label is that it comes with a second disc of demos from Squaresoft. Some really interesting stuff in here from Legend of Mana, Chrono Cross, Front Mission 3, Chocobo Racing. So just know that this is probably the version to collect. It's about $30. You can get the other greatest hits version for about $20 or $25. Alright, well that's my review. Thanks for watching.